I think you can count on a Texas-Florida State game in the not-too-distant future. That would be a conference game, I'm guessing right now. Yeah, a conference game. It'll take a few years, I guess, to cycle through the league, but I'm guessing there'll be a Texas-Florida State conference game in the not-too-distant future. The reason, not all that surprisingly, is that Florida State is moving pretty quickly to get out of the ACC and into the SEC. And I suspect they wanted to do this before they got screwed over by some goofball committee, but they're going to fast track it now. And I think it's going to start a domino effect that could be both good and bad. It'll happen. They'll bail the ACC and they'll join the SEC. And then the SEC is going to have to add another, even though they're going to pretend that they won't do it, and they'll pretend that they never really cared about this, and Florida State just randomly cold called them out of the blue. But they'll add someone else, and I'm guessing that would be either Clemson or Miami or both or more. And if it's both or more, expect the SEC to add another. And I think that'll all happen pretty fast. And you can't blame Florida State because they were screwed over by the stupid structure of college football today. And then they had to feel that it was SEC bias, of which I think they're right about that. They had to feel like, man, if we were in a different league and we went undefeated, if we were in that league and we went undefeated, then we'd be in the tournament. Fake tournament. It's only 4 teams. So I don't know that anyone has a problem with them bailing on their current league and joining another. And their position will be this. We'll make more money, and we won't get passed over again by a goofball committee. And they're going to be right about that. So what happens at the ACC? Well, depending on how quickly it all falls apart, and it'll fall apart, it may just end up like the Pac-12. It's just a matter of how fast that happens. It's going to quickly dissolve. They'll splinter, but there's not that many places for many of them to go. And there's not that many people that want that many of them from the ACC. But I suspect once 1, 2, or 3 bail, then the others are going to have to find a place to go. Anybody and everybody that can get out most likely will get out, and that league will be screwed. So here's what's widely reported now by ESPN and everywhere else, because apparently there's a meeting tomorrow morning. Then I'm going to tell you exactly why this is kind of good, and then it's pretty awful. Florida State, according to Yahoo Sports, is expected to soon start the process of its long-discussed divorce from the ACC. Conference affiliation is at the center of a scheduled meeting Friday and Saturday of the FSU Board of Trustees, and the result of the meeting could produce a formal legal filing in what many describe as the first step to achieve an exit from the ACC's binding grant of rights agreement. You know how this works with Texas. They just buy their way out. So I assume Florida State tries to do the same thing. They're just coming up with the money right now and trying to figure out a way to do it. The ACC agreed to its current deal with ESPN in 2016. So it's a 20-year agreement. They've got a few years left. So they're probably just simply adding up what it will cost to get out as soon as possible. And then everyone else is going to do the exact same thing. In the latest realignment move, Yahoo reports, the ACC gained Cal, Stanford, and SMU despite aggressive pushback within the conference, mainly Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson. In other words, if you remember right, SMU had to buy, it's pathetic, had to buy their way into the league. So the league, in terms of football landscape, didn't add a heck of a lot. Basketball landscape either didn't add a heck of a lot. But they took some members just to probably collect a few checks. So Florida State starts to bail, then the others follow behind. The others that are marketable and do matter, they will bail quickly, and then that thing is going to look like the Pac-12 probably in no time. Okay, this is good, I guess, and it's bad. And I can argue both sides of this. What I like what many of you don't like, but I like the anarchy of this because I think the setup of college football is just a disaster. I think it's illogical. I think it's ridiculously greedy. I think it's narrow-minded, and I don't think it's that entertaining. But what I do like about this is that this should, and I'm going to put it in all caps, should fast-track another realignment. Now, some people would say, man, Jeff, it's not going to fast-track a realignment. It's going to dissolve another league. Okay, yes, that's true. Call it whatever you want. This will be the Pac-12 East Coast version. But it's going to fast-track movement. Just like when Texas and Oklahoma did their deal. It started to fast-track everything because it's a sport run by greed. But it's going to fast-track another realignment. It's a directionless sport with no guidance and no thought whatsoever. But it should, putting in all caps again, it should take the sport closer to a setup of 64 teams, hopefully, I argue, broken down by regional conferences. In other words, I think it's possible, although I don't think there's leadership. I don't think there's any thought into this whatsoever. They just run for their lives and try to make as much money for themselves as they can. But it'll start to become plainly obvious. Once the ACC collapses, just like the Pac-12 collapsed, and everyone's scattering looking for a place to get another check, right? And I'm not saying you blame Florida State. I mean, one, they got screwed in the playoff, and two, they can make more money. They're just going to go. But it should create enough chaos, I would argue, that you've got a whole nother repositioning. You'd have two leagues that have died in a fairly short amount of time. My gosh, they die in 6 months. So maybe it drives the sport back to a more regional appeal. The problem is, because that's the way it should be, the problem is the greed is getting in the way, and the greed is either blinding them or they have no vision anyway. So this is what I've argued from the very beginning, okay? And people are giddy about going to the SEC. Florida State's going to be giddy about going to the SEC. It sounds nice. Sounds pretty cool. You get a couple of big games a year. But when you really step back, I mean, think about it. If you're a fan of, fill in the blank, but just say Texas. For every 2 big games you get, right? For Texas, what is it next year? Georgia and Florida, and that's being generous to Florida. For every 2 big games you get, in the case of Texas, you get a bunch of games that really aren't any better than what you had in the Big 12. In fact, you'd rather watch the bottom half of the Big 12 play against your school, your program you're a fan of, than you would some school you know nothing about. In other words, if you're a fan, would you rather, and I don't care what league it is, I don't care what part of the country it is, you can apply the same logic to it. So, yeah. If you're in the Big 12 and you're Texas, you stayed the Big 12. Yeah, you wouldn't get Georgia. Right. You wouldn't get Florida. Okay. But you'd get Vanderbilt. You'd get Mississippi State. I mean, if you're a fan, would you rather watch Mississippi State in Texas or Vanderbilt in Texas or Texas and Baylor or Texas and Texas Tech? I mean, really, what's the upside there? I mean, is there really that much appeal? Is it that much greater appeal? You wouldn't. I'm fairly certain you wouldn't, and I think the TV numbers would play that out. Would USC, for example, to take the dead Pac-12, would USC versus Arizona be a better draw on TV and in person, by the way, than USC versus Indiana? Or Oregon versus, I don't care, fill in the blank, UCLA. Would that be a better draw than Oregon-Purdue? Oregon-Rutgers? You see my point? Yeah, you're cashing in or thinking you're cashing in to get a couple you think marquee games, but you're then replacing the bottom level games with programs that people in your area of the country have no clue and don't care. To me, it's a really bad idea on every level. And either this shakeup either shakes it up so much and another big league completely dissolves, which I think is going to happen. I think we already know the template here. You lose a couple more programs and you just shut it down because everybody panics. Everyone that can get out, like the Pac-12, is going to get out. And the league will die. So when that league dies, the next league dies. is that going to make the shakeup where people say, wait a second here, what are we all doing? Why are we all running in different directions when you should just run right back to a regional conference, and that way we'd all have more appeal? I don't think they will because of greed. I can explain that one too. But regional games are just going to be better. I mean, I guess you could say, well, gosh, Jeff, Florida State, it belongs in the SEC. True. Okay. But think about this. Most of the games are not only bad games, but they don't have regional appeal. And it's not only better to watch and better for fans, it's much better advertising too. My ad dollars would make a lot more sense and would have far greater justification if it's the Chevy dealers of Arizona than it would Texas v. Vanderbilt. It's just, there's no connection. You're not giving me the eyeballs that are in my backyard. The thing standing in the way of a new setup, right? And all the timing of this is pretty remarkable because it's exactly what the head coach of UCLA talked about just a few days ago. Now, he is one of the haves. That's Chip Kelly. So Chip Kelly is sitting here saying, well, we're going to go cash into the Big Ten. We're going to go play Wisconsin. We're going to play Indiana. We're going to play Purdue. All the games that no one cares about. Just because we like the chance to play Michigan and Ohio State. But he was right. Exactly what he said is how this shakeup should happen and how it should finish up. I just don't know that it will. And you can ask yourself if it will, because I think greed eats this industry alive. And it works like this. Okay? It's greed and a lack of leadership. See, unlike the NFL, and I know it's more programs, 64, 84, whatever it is. Unlike the NFL, college sports is driven by trying to get an advantage over the other program. Like, it's just this constant quest to one-up the school that's 150 miles away. These bureaucrats are constantly trying to make more money than the other program. There's no concern for the product, or very little concern for the product, and I would say very little concern for the fan. This shakeup is not about fans at all. It's just a bunch of bureaucrats chasing more dollars so they can pay a coach more and get more stuff. And lost is whether or not you really care or want to see it. They chase every dollar because athletic directors are obsessed with making the most they can so they can beat the other guy and spend the most money possible on a coach and facilities. Now you're going to say, well, what's wrong with that, Jeff? That's the business they're in. Yeah, well, what's wrong with that is it's incredibly short-sighted. There's no leadership, no interest in making the sport bigger, and no interest in making the product better, and no interest in you, the fan. It's only about, I want mine, and I want to make as much as I can so I can beat you. Chip Kelly set it up perfectly. Part of me is optimistic that this greedy shakeout again, this collapse of another conference, and basically going to have conferences collapsing on both coasts. That's what's going to come out of this, right? My hope is that more people will start to pick up on what Chip Kelly said. That is, you end up with 64 teams, okay? You're not in your league or their league or that league. You're in the league, okay? The NFL is the brand. It's the shield. It's 32 teams. Chip Kelly is saying, why aren't we 64 teams? Why aren't we a 64-team league that negotiates all collectively? You have 64 teams. We'll call it whatever you want. You get the bureaucrats out of it. College football, it's the most bloated industry I can think of. There's more VPs of VPs of VPs in that field than any other place. And as most of you know that function in good places, nothing works that way. So you're able to get rid of a lot of bureaucrats. You have, take your pick, 6 or 8 leagues, doesn't matter, broken up regionally. You have 8 to 10 conference games. And then as he laid out in less than 2 sentences, you cross over to specific leagues each year. You cross over to that one year, cross over to that one year, just like the NFL does it. You would retain 8 to 10 regional games. It's better for the network, better for the fans. Just is. Makes more sense financially. So you would have then you would have a 16-team playoff field divided up by the league winners and wild cards. You would completely eliminate the opinions of a committee. You would have a league. You'd have a league. You'd have a shield. You'd have a brand. You'd have a 64-team league or a 32-team league. And it would then be negotiating on its own with ESPN and the others, just like what the NFL does. I mean, college football is pretending it's not in the same orbit as the NFL, but it's trying to position itself just like the NFL and doing a lousy job. It's a lousy job. As soon as this Florida State thing goes down, and they'll try to make it pretty quick. Heck, they might play somebody they might be in the league by next Tuesday. But you would think somewhere along the way, somebody at a network would say, whoa, you bureaucrats don't know what you're doing. You're just running around trying to find the next deal. Why is UCLA playing Rutgers anyway? How stupid can you be? I can't sell advertising from L.A. to northern New Jersey. Are you guys crazy? No. Here's the way you have to do it. And then they would get their 64 teams. You'd still have your leagues. They would just not be different names chasing different dollars in far different places. I mean, it's perfectly logical and more economically beneficial. And there's two ways to look at this Florida State move. It can shake it up so badly, it ends up trying to figure itself out and make sense. Or it shakes itself up so badly, it's chaos. And the next thing you know, North Carolina is going to be playing Oregon State. That's what they'll do. These fools that don't know how to market and don't know anything. You've got an entire template of the NFL right in front of your face. And notice how nobody says, guys, wait a second. Okay, Florida State, yeah, you're pissed. You should be. First of all, can we stop with the committees who vote on opinions? Stop it. Just we're ending that exercise now. Next, listen, everybody, we're all in the same business. We need to generate the most eyeballs so we generate the most money instead of you guys in bad-looking jackets go chase the next deal right down the street. You need regional matchups. The business further, I think, argue all you want, the further that sport and business gets away from regional matchups. I didn't say every game. Right? It doesn't stop Texas from playing Michigan. It doesn't. But the more that industry gets away from regional games, the worse it is for you and the worse it is for the business. It just doesn't make any sense. This is going to be the chance to fix it. I'm betting they don't fix it. I'm betting the chaos ends up in a worse place than a better place. Disruption is good in every industry, except when you're one that's full of bureaucrats like college football. Everywhere else, disruption is healthy, and it makes you reinvent yourself, and it makes you get smarter, and it makes you get leaner. We're about to see if in college football it gets smarter or it gets crazier.